All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. I see a lot of great and beautiful faces here. I'm super excited for today. So just to start us off, my name is Lukoho Kasomo. I'm the co-founder of the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit. We were founded in 2018. We had our first summit in New York in 2019. And since then, we've been putting on several events now in the digital space to make sure that we are just connecting with millennial and Gen Z young Congolese professionals. Today, we have a lovely panel featuring 6 very diverse Congolese women. We've partnered with NKENTO Congo, and I'm going to kick it to them soon so that they can give a brief introduction about who they are. But basically, we are based in North America. We've kind of become a source, not just for Congolese people in North America, but throughout the diaspora. And we focus on diaspora engagement and connecting bridges with Congolese, both in the US and abroad. So super excited for these women to speak. They all come from so many different places. Ladies, when you introduce yourself, just make sure you tell people where you are in the world, because we have some really cool folks who are all over. So with that, I'm gonna kick it over to NKENTO Congo, and Vanessa, feel free to take over the stage.
Thank you so much, Lukogo. That's such a lovely introduction. And first of all, I want to thank our lovely guest speakers who are from across the globe to join us on this panel to celebrate Congolese women in honor of Women's History Month. So for those who do not know me, I am Vanessa Ngoma. I am the founder of Kento Congo. Kento means Women in Kikongo. And our mission with Kento is to empower women and provide them with the tools with access to the tools and resources they need to create a better life for themselves and their families. And we want to increase the visibility and profitability of women in business in Congo and in the diaspora. And yeah, we want to change the narrative and improve the role model visibility, because obviously, look at the women around here, we have role models and we want to expose them even more than they are already. So that's a little intro about me and Kento. So I'm going to pass the mic to Gloria Nzeka, who is the moderator today and who's going to be asking all the questions. So yeah, the stage is yours, Gloria.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, and thank you to everybody who has joined us this afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. My name is Gloria, and I'm currently pursuing studies here in Maryland in information studies, and I am going to go right straight into the questions. But before we get started, I would like to mention to everybody who's on the call today that you received an email with the bio of all of our panelists today. So we are not gonna read their bios. You can get to know them better at your own pace. I will start with the questions, but I would like to mention who is on our panel today. We have Joelle Avellino. Joelle Avellino, she is an illustrator and an animator. She's worked with various brands that we know. She's worked with Elle Magazine, BBC, just to name a few. We also have Deborah Kimbutta. Deborah is an attorney. She runs a legal practice that is focused mainly on immigration and contracts law. We also have Faika Mukendi. She is a finance and accounting professional in the tech industry. We have Adolphine Lukabu Shelley. She is a business owner and she runs her own lifestyle practice, which is called lifestyle company, which is called Adolphine. We have Marielle Amani Tete. She currently works as a program manager for CARES Learning Tours. And we also have Simba Valene. She is a founder and brand curator in lifestyle, culture, and identity. She founded an online clothing brand, which is called Libaya. Without further ado, we're gonna go straight into our questions today, and I would like to start with Joelle. Joelle, my first question to you is, what interested you about animation and illustration? With Joelle?
I don't think Joelle is here yet. So I think it's better that we start with someone else, and then as soon as Joelle is in, we can continue her questions.
Great, I will go to Deborah. Deborah, you run a legal practice that focuses on immigration and contracts law. What interested you about this field?
I always like to say that immigration found me. I never went seeking for immigration. As a matter of fact, during law school, I specifically said I was not going to do immigration law, only because I didn't like necessarily dealing with laws that had me involved in people's private lives. I don't like, and naturally, I'm not that kind of person. But I initially wanted to do criminal law, got into law school, found out the reality of criminal law and hated it. And then I moved into international business, and I kept telling myself I wanted to be part of building the next or the next big African-owned Coca-Cola company, right? So like a major monster company. I wanted to be part of that legal team. I loved everything that international business gave me, but it just wasn't enough. And then I did an internship with the UN and got into diplomacy and more into not necessarily politics, but dealing with the international community and developing countries. And that's when I kind of started getting a feel that I wanted to be more people based and to make actual governmental based changes with my people and people that are like my people. So I after that, the pandemic, after I graduated and took the bar, the pandemic hit. And so during the pandemic, I was getting a lot of people contacting me about basic immigration questions. I picked up a book one day and it was just one person after the other. Then I started posting facts. And before I knew it, I had to, establish myself and protect myself as far as, helping people out. And then that snowballed into a firm. So that's how I ended up here.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story. And you touched on it a little bit having to do with the pandemic, how you started working during this COVID environment. How were you able to fully converge a virtual practice during this time?
It took a while. It took a while because one, I had to convince myself that I was in that weird stage of graduation and then automatically, working. I spent the previous year right after graduating, I worked in Congo physically. And I was working for a Congolese company. So I coming back into America and the pandemic hitting automatically, it kind of, I'm so sorry.
Uh,
I'm sorry, noise picked up. Coming back into America, I had to not only acclimate to the pandemic, but I also had to kind of fight off that imposter syndrome and figure out that, okay, I'm an immigration attorney and then now I'm a firm. So all of that happened within the span of like 6 months. Unfortunately, the pandemic was good to me because I didn't have to necessarily market the firm as a virtual firm. And then soon enough, the more I started growing confidence, I figured out that me being fully virtual in this time is actually a selling point and not necessarily a handicap. So now I'm actually advertising as a virtual firm and it's saving me a lot of overhead costs and it's saving my clients a lot of travel.
wow. Great work. I would like to ask, I have more questions for you, Deborah, but I'll come back to you later. I would like to ask Faika. Faika, you are in the STEM field, and we know that women, specifically women of color, are underrepresented in these fields in science and technology. What inspired you to pursue this field? Did you have role models, and how did you get into the STEM?
Yeah, so I did want to address Luco's question earlier. I'm based in Atlanta right now. So yes, I'm the STEM field. I'm part of the math part of the STEM field because for my field, from finance and accounting, you do have to have kind of some math background for you to get into the field. Definitely started with growing up in Kinshasa. My father was a finance director for some branch of the government. I'm not sure exactly which one, but I watched him do that growing up, and he was someone who valued ethics a lot. And so I did remember watching him struggle with being ethical as a finance director in Kinshasa. So for me, my takeaway from that was that this is a way to advance our people. This is a way to advance the way we work and the way we think. And so that's kind of stuck with me growing up. And the other role model that kind of shaped me going into the field was one of my aunts who went to college in Belgium. So I'm from Burundi and Congo. So on the Burundi side, my aunt went to college in Belgium and became an auditor at Deloitte. And I watched her, she would come visit us as we were in Kinshasa here and there from Belgium. And I watched her grow into her field. And right now she's leading CSR at BNP Paribas. So those are the main two role models that have shaped me going to the field. As I found myself in college, I actually did not study finance. I studied business management, and I didn't think that I would end up in finance, which is very ironic. I actually ended up in finance through networking after graduating. I've had no intentions in going into finance, but once I got into the field, I started remembering these things. And for me, it's kind of a way for me to prepare myself to contribute to the advancement of our country at some point. And so I do feel all these roles that I've held from Boeing to Microsoft to currently at Google are roles that are helping me shape my understanding of how I can contribute to advancing Congo in the future.
Great. You mentioned some of the great tech companies, Google and Boeing, Microsoft and others. What are some of the challenges that you face getting into those companies?
Getting into them, or right now, right while I'm in them right now?
Both. The challenges, first of all, getting in and progressing and continuing a career in tech.
Yeah, so I would say getting in, I learned really quickly because when I graduated undergrad, I did not have a job. I didn't have a job for the first 6 months. And those were dark times. I would say I do not wish that on anyone, having a degree and not having a job. So quickly as I went through my job hunt, I was reading books about how to get a job. And that's literally how I kind of shifted my job hunt. And I would practice the things that I learned from books. And I quickly learned that networking was key. If you have the qualifications, that's not enough. For the most part, it's not for you to get into these big companies and these big corporations. You need to know someone inside and someone who will advocate for you. So after learning that, I started networking like crazy. And honestly, that's from the mix of my qualifications and my networking is what led me to getting into these big corporations. So that's what I would say is a challenge. I think a lot of folks tend to focus more on their qualifications and say, you know, I'm going to get the degree and that's that, and I'm just going to apply. And that's not enough for the most part. It works sometimes, but not all the time. So current challenges right now, I would say, is representation. So that I would say is a theme across all the companies I've worked for, from Boeing to Microsoft to currently at Google. There aren't enough Black people, there aren't enough Africans, there's not enough of us in these companies. So you're always the only one in every room for the most part. And so that tends to affect the way your career growth, it affects your career growth in a sense, because if you think about it, if you have a manager who doesn't know how to talk to a Black person, an African person, because they've never worked with them, that's very common in my industry. I come across a lot of people who have never worked with a Black person before, period. And so they tend to not know how to talk to you because they only know about Black people and Africans from movies. And so if you think about someone like that having the power of your career, of you moving forward, of advocating for you so that you get promoted, if someone like that doesn't know how to talk to you and doesn't know your strengths and what you're working on, doesn't know how to give you feedback so you can get better, then that tends to affect you getting promoted. So then for me, when I see that, ultimately it leads to most of us not having opportunities to get promoted in the same time as our white counterparts and so forth, which tends to lead to how our money is affected. We make less money if we're not promoted. And so that's, for me, is the biggest challenge, is representation and training that for these folks who are managing us, who are managing everyone, to understand how to work with everyone.
Very important things you've touched on there: networking, representation. Hopefully we'll cover a lot more on that throughout the hour that we have today. I want to go to Marielle. Similar to the technology field, we know that the US foreign policy industry is not very inviting and welcoming to people of color. So what has been your experience navigating a career in that industry?
Yeah, thank you, Gloria. So I started, and I'm based in Washington, D.C., by the way. Hi, everyone. I started my career on Capitol Hill. And upon graduating from undergrad, where I studied political science and international relations was a double major, I was an intern on Capitol Hill, and I kind of view that as my way to land in DC. And the plan was arrive in DC, do the internship, and it was in the Senate, and then find a job in development or foreign policy, more broadly. And the senator that I interned for was from my home state of Maine. That's where I grew up. I was born in Kinshasa, but grew up in Portland, Maine. And while I was there, again, my plan was to leave. It didn't happen that way. And I found that they were receptive to my interests. That being, you know, with every congressional office, there's one that's responsible for foreign policy. And that team welcomed me and allowed me to take on projects and join them during events. And while some of the roles that I took on formally in that office, while there for 3 years, was staff assistant briefly, so running the front office and more administrative, and then becoming the senator's state scheduler. But while based in Washington, D.C., I was able to join this team for various events. I took on projects. And interestingly, because of the committees that my boss sat on, which were armed services, I ended up attending or connecting more with folks in the defense space, which wasn't really my interest. I was more interested in development and diplomacy. But anyway, that got me to a lot of events and allowed me to network. And even then, I would show up to these events, and people were willing to exchange cards because they saw the Senate and they knew that in my role as a scheduler, I was the members' gatekeeper. So I still had access to important folks. But to that end, I wasn't formally contributing to the space yet. So I had to find a way to make them interested in me as much as I was interested in them. And I think at the baseline, it was just like sharing about my life experiences, having been born in Kinshasa, I grew up in Portland, Maine, occupying very diverse spaces, studied in Morocco. So I would always touch on my personal experiences. And then furthermore, just being in the office, I made it my goal and my mission to just connect with folks that I had access to. And so while being in that front office, people would come in of great importance, wanting to meet with, there for meetings with a senator. And it'd be like, I tell them about my interests, and many of them I've acquired at least like 5 mentors and lifelong friends just from those exchanges. Anyway, fast forward to my current job and more formal work in foreign policy. I was actually recruited by CARE. Came across my profile, a headhunter came across my profile on LinkedIn, having Senate experience. Also on the Hill, I made sure I really learned the inner workings of the Capitol and the Senate, from event planning at high level and just connecting with people and put that out there. And so they reached out, and my current role at CARE as a program manager, learning towards. So I travel with members and senior staff of Congress, both in the House and Senate, to developing countries in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, to educate them about the reach and use of U.S. foreign assistance and U.S. funded programs. And yeah, so really got to utilize a lot of that relationship management that I created on the Hill, and also managing members and folks on the Hill. And I'm actually transferring those skills into a more elevated role, which I'll start in a couple of weeks, as Director of U.S. Government Relations at the One Campaign. So yeah, I think while I could detail some challenges that I've had along the way, I think that I've also been really fortunate, like having worked in an office that was really encouraging and supportive of my interests, but also I recognize that because I was occupying a lot of spaces where I wasn't necessarily the experienced person in the room, I made sure that I made it clear that I was there to learn. And what I contributed to those conversations, the onset was more like, this is my life experience. This is how we can connect, whether it was conversing in French or talking about travel experiences, or, you know, my background is Congolese and making those connections with people in the community.
Great. If you were to tell somebody who is interested in foreign policy, based on your experience, what would you advise them to do based on what you've learned through your journey? What are some of the things, if you were to go back, let's say 2, 3 years or 5 years back, what are some of the things that you would have done which you would want to pass on to somebody today who is interested in foreign policy?
I think so. With all this networking that I did pretty early on, for some reason, I was a little more reluctant to approach other Africans, just generally. And by that I mean I would go to my networking wasn't just on at Hill related events, but whether it was the Atlantic Council or CSIS or Brookings, all of these think tanks putting together events, I would still gravitate towards like people who are in the space. I think that also comes from just growing up in very white spaces. But as I moved along, and I think in the past like couple of years, I've just been more intentional about making those connections. And even in the past 2 years, I've just seen my network grow tremendously. And the perspectives, I think the fact that there are more Africans and more people of color in the space. And I think not forgetting that is one thing I remember, and just not, or encourage and not dismissing the fact that their experiences are just as valuable. And in fact, their experiences are even more valuable and offer perspective that, you know, I think white people are sometimes in more leadership roles can't. And I've used that now as a motivator. Like, while I might not be like the policy wonk on an issue, I can, you know, do a deeper dive in an issue because I've lived it, right? And so, yeah, just remembering that you do have an authority to speak from the perspective of an African or someone coming from these regions.
Thank you for sharing that. And I forgot to say congratulations for your new position.
Thank you.
My next question goes to Simba. What was your mission with Libaya and later on Fofa? In the beginning, I introduced you, I mentioned that you created your brand, Libaya. It's a clothing company. What was your mission with the company? And also with later on, if you can touch a little bit on the Fofa.
So Libaya I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm based in Amsterdam. And to talk about Libaya, it started naturally, to be very honest. I didn't really have a business plan or a clear mission. It was more of a feeling. And that's how I, as a multi-passionated creative, start most of my ideas. But the feeling was that African women have always been part of the global book of style. And for too long, looking at the Western fashion history and the images and the stories told about trendsetters, I just noticed that everything was centered around non-African people. While in my reality, growing up with my mothers and aunties and their libaya, puffy arms, ruffles and flares, and the liputas around their waist, to me, those were the style influences that I looked up to, you know? So I always felt like African women and Congolese women specifically have been doing the things that are now being considered as the new way of making fashion, from handmade items, attention to details, having close and sustainable relationships with the makers behind your products, and even the sisterhood in fashion. So it was a feeling that at that moment when I started Libaya, I couldn't really express in words. So I just decided to share it through a brand and make items, which is something that I'm good at. And I think now this journey led to a mission that somehow is focused on also showing young Congolese fashion creatives that they should not underestimate our rich stories from the diaspora and from the continent as well. And I feel like too often we take so much of that is ours for granted, while the stories that we carry are the way forward for many industries. So yeah, I think that's my mission at this point, inspiring other people to take their personal stories very serious.
Very inspiring. And you mentioned now that you are based in the Netherlands, right?
Yeah.
So as a trend researcher and as a strategist, and you've had to contribute to the diversification of the Dutch fashion industry. Is this an easy road to travel on?
It's funny because I would say yes and no at the same time. The reason why I would say yes is because when I decided, because my career didn't start in the Netherlands. When I graduated, I moved to Ghana, Accra, where I worked with for Flisco and Within. So when I came back, it was during a time where the diversity conversation exploded in the Netherlands. So it was really easy for me to be picked up as one of the only few African women who had a brand. So it took me a year to get it to spread in the Dutch Vogue, and within 2 years, I got featured in all the renowned magazines here. So it kind of didn't feel very difficult for me. And at the same time, I would say no, because most of the times, those experiences I have here are still very tokenistic, being the only Black girl in a room or in a magazine. And I also came to realize that for a lot of us, and I'm saying us because I kind of feel that is a reality for some of the women on the panel here as well. When you do things as a first Black or Congolese person and are able to stay true to your African identity and then appeal to a broader audience, I feel like you are given a role to build those bridges and to open the doors for people who will come after you. So, and even when you are not interested anymore, or when you don't have the energy, you just need to do it, So that is why I'm still here and focused on contributing to this Dutch industry. And that's why it's not always an easy road, because existing in these spaces as the only Black and Congolese girl feels like a revolution for a lot of people, which is beautiful for some, but uncomfortable for many. So it's not always easy to take this role. Yeah.
Wow. Very, very inspiring story. Like all the stories today, very inspiring. So we're still in the fashion industry, and I would like to talk to Adolphine. Adolphine also has a brand as a fashion label. And Adolphine, what inspired you to go into fashion?
Hi, everyone. So my experience is different than Simba's. My daughter inspired me to really get into the business. I worked in finance and real estate development, and I always wanted to do something creative. My mom was a creative, my aunts, they all had their little shops, they were commerçants, and I wanted to follow in their footsteps, but I just didn't have the confidence to do it. So it took my 8-year-old to motivate me and get me going. And it's been good and bad. It's hard to run a business when you're in the States and your team's in the Congo, but WhatsApp has been amazing. And I've been able to find amazing team members back home to help bring this vision to life. So that's been one of the more interesting and surprising part of running this business.
Great. And you just mentioned now that you have a team back home that you work with, and you do use a lot of fabric that come from the Congo. And can you please take us through the process? Like, how are you able to source and manufacture some of your products in Congo? Well, it looks like we've lost Adolphine. Oh, okay, she's back.
No, I'm here. It's a process, we've been doing this business for almost 3 years. And the first year I didn't produce anything to market. We tested everything. I met the artisans. I went and looked at the fabrics. We made samples. We tested everything out. And then having an office back home and having people that are able to travel for me and do spot checks or quality checks have been a big help.
Thank you for sharing, Adolphine. We'll still come back with a few more questions. But Joelle is here. I would like to ask Joelle a couple questions. Good to have you, Joelle. Joelle is an illustrator, and she's into design and animation and all of that. So Joelle, could you please tell us what led you into this specific field?
Hi, yeah, so I've always art has always been an escape from a very young age. From when as young as I can really remember, I would literally lock myself up in my room and just draw and listen to music. It's just always been my escape. So, and it's also always been the only thing that I feel like I've really been good at. So throughout my whole education life, I've always just studied an art subject. So I'll be doing like business and marketing, and then I always just do art on the side as well, because it's the only subject I've really felt fulfilled doing. And again, because I never intentionally decided to pick up art to be an illustrator, because I didn't think it was possible. Growing up, I never saw illustrators that looked like myself. So I never really thought it was possible. And again, growing up in an African household, it was just like, what's that going to do for you? Where are you going to go with that? So I always would just do like a business related subject because it sounded good. So even when I graduated from uni, I went on to work in marketing for 3 years. But you know, when the fire is just not there, I've always continued to just do illustration on the side. And thank goodness for Instagram, I just kind of started putting my work out there, and here I am today.
Sorry, I was on mute there. What are some of the challenges that you have faced? You mentioned that family was not very accepting, and you went to study different things, but your heart was in illustration. What were some of these challenges, and how were you able to navigate the challenges to reach to where you are today?
Well, one of my biggest challenges growing up really was just not having this family support, really. So it didn't give me that confidence. So I would never I didn't really think I was going to be an illustrator. But, you know, especially after having my daughter, something happens to you when you become a mum. And I just kept looking at her and I was just like, you know what if she did? I wanted to be an example to her, and there's this desire in my heart, and I just like to myself, I have to chase that dream. And again, also just not having that representation and not seeing anyone that looked like me, that was really hard as well, because you just don't think it can happen for yourself. But again, for me, it was just that little I just had this little thing inside of me, and I just knew it's going to work out. So I'll just block out all the negative thoughts, although they're always going to come anyway, and just do at least, even if it's just one thing a day, that's going to help me get closer to that dream and just to pursue that creative career. So just daily and just every single day, just showing up, just turning up, even if it's just 10 minutes a day, because that 10 minutes will always turn into like an hour or 2 hours. So yeah, just have to just consistency and just really just believing in yourself.
Consistency, very important. So quickly, what are some of the techniques and the resources that you use, and what are some of your favorite technology that you use to design and do illustration today?
Yeah, so I've started off using traditional methods, so pen to paper, painting. But in a world that we're living in now, everything is so fast paced. I had to really learn digital illustration. So I work using a digital pad. So it's just a quick, I wouldn't get half the work I get now and work at the pace I'm working now if I wasn't working digitally. So everything is on Photoshop and Illustrator. So these are Adobe softwares.
Amazing. So I'm going to go back to each and every one of our panelists today, but these questions now will focus on your advice. Like, what are some of the best advice that you can give to people who are interested in your particular field? And I'm going to go back to Deborah. What is the best strategy to get into the field that you are in, finance. Oh, no, I'm talking about Deborah. Deborah is in law. Yeah, she's an attorney running a virtual legal practice. What is the best approach and strategy to get into your field?
My current advice, I forgot to say it the first time, but I'm physically in Congo, but I'm based in Dallas, Texas. But my advice for anyone looking to get into law is to make sure that it's something that you want to do, and not to base that off of movies and things like that. And then also to limit the amount, it's going to sound weird, but limit the amount of advice that you get from other people. The scariest things for me when I embarked on this journey was the fact that I heard a lot of people making law school seem like a beast. And don't get me wrong, it is. It's very emotionally trying, and it demands a lot of your time. It forces you to unlearn a lot of what your norm is. However, it's not impossible. And a lot of people told me that it was near impossible when I was walking into it. So the main thing is make a decision, decide that this is what you want to do. I wouldn't even, it's okay if you don't know what type of law you want to do going in because of how the legal system is set up in America. Everybody goes to law school and studies subjects up until your third year, and then you kind of get a freedom on what you want to learn, but the bar is over the same type of laws with the exception of specific state-based laws. So it's okay to learn as you go, and to trust your confidence. I would definitely get into having a support system, learning about how you learn and understanding. It took me a while to understand that I learn how I learn and not how other people learn. So kind of learning about yourself and your manner of retaining information, because that's a lot of what law is about. But my main thing would be, unless you want to stand in front of a courtroom, because of how much law school costs and the amount of time that goes into it, unless you want to stand in front of a courtroom or do something that demands an attorney's signature, I would venture out and look into other fields that might be a little bit shorter, other degrees that might take less time or take less, investment in like paying for education, and go into that. As far as being a woman, being a Black woman in the legal field in America, you got to build tough skin, unfortunately. And I hate saying that, but you do. I've been called a legal assistant a lot of times. I've been called a secretary a lot of times. I've had clients talk to me like I'm a child because I'm a little bit younger than typical. You build a tough skin and you understand that you are your brand, whether you're working for your own firm, whether you're working for someone else. You understand that you are your best selling points, and you're supposed to be the main person that believes in yourself the most. So you have to start working towards that confidence and trusting you're working out those kinks, like imposter syndrome, and understanding that you're going to be in that position. You're going to get into law school. You're going to pass the bar because you deserve it. So it's a hard road to get to that, and it's a hard road to start trusting yourself as the main product that you're marketing. But that's definitely something that is a weapon that you should dress yourself in, so that you walk in your agency and your authority when you enter rooms.
Wow, thank you. Before we proceed with all of our panelists today, I would like to welcome questions from the public. Everybody's on the call today. If you have a question for our panel, feel free to raise your hand or write your question in the chat box, but feel free to ask any question that you have for our panelists today. Simba, what is your advice for somebody wanting to go into fashion?
That's a good one. Well, I'm personally not only focused on the fashion industry. The funny thing about my brand is that I do not even consider myself as a designer, because I'm just really good in building brands. I studied trend research and concept development, so my work is still very multidisciplinary. So if I would give like a general advice for someone who wants to work in the fashion or creative industry, the first thing I would say is never ask for permission to be included in spaces where you belong, because I feel like most of the times, and also in these times where we are talking about representation, like a lot of people are feeling like we need to ask for permission to be part of something, while those industries have been part of our cultures for so long as well. So that would be my first advice. And if I would highlight the fashion and creative industry, I think it is those are industries where it's really about who you know, which gives you access to certain information other people may not have. So I would say always be a nice person, connect with the right people, and never stop learning, because it's also a fast changing industry. So it's knowing the right people, having access to important information that will, I feel, will make you successful in the fashion and creative industry. And being authentic, what I think someone else also said, the only way to stand out is to be you. Don't underestimate the power of your personal story. Because what I learned as someone who is not traditionally a fashion designer, fashion is not just about clothes, it's about the stories that you tell. So that's my advice.
Great. So authenticity and connecting with people in the industry. We've got two questions from two people on the call today. I have the first question I'd like to take is from Donna. Donna, would you welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Good morning, everyone. So I just have a really quick question for Deborah. As an immigration lawyer who is currently in Congo, do you find it difficult to conduct business with people that are in the United States? And are you just there temporarily and you're going to be returning to the States?
Yes, I didn't specify that correctly. I'm sorry. So I'm actually based, and majority of my firm is registered in the United States. So I'm a United States. What I'm doing here is I'm actually trying to open up a full service firm based in Congo that hires Congolese based attorneys to handle their own cases under the firm's umbrella so that they don't have to have the overhead cost of having a firm. Now it's, I'm a brand new firm. I've only been operational for about a year. And so coming here, this is my second time since the firm's been open, coming to Congo. So being able to operate my day-to-day things from another country has been difficult. I am fully virtual, so there's a lot of things that I'm doing here that I can do from my desk. So it's the same thing, but I'm also someone that doesn't like to delegate a lot. So having to trust my interns and my legal assistant to do a lot of things has been the most difficult part of everything. But other than that, phones are being covered, emails, I always have my email in front of me. So it's easier to stay in contact with my clients. And because I'm fully virtual, my business is where I am. So I'm still learning the kinks, but it hasn't been impossible.
Thank you. And just one last question. Do you have a website, and could you share your contact information?
I definitely will share my contact information. My website is still getting built, but I'm very heavily involved on social media. So I'll put that in the chat as well as my email.
Okay, thank you.
Phone number.
Great. We have another question for Faika. This question comes from Lisa. It's in the chat. I'm going to read it out. Did your business administration degree help you in your finance field, or have you had to get certifications, maybe an MBA degree?
Yeah, so I would say that finance in these big companies, you have training. And so if you have an understanding of a general business understanding, then you can pretty much learn the majority of the roles, especially when it comes to entry level roles. And so that's where marketing yourself comes into play. Having an understanding, like, for example, if you have a job that you're interested in, reading what they're requiring for that job, and then looking at what you've learned in college through your business degree or whatever else that you studied, and then trying to create a link between the two. So that's how I would say that my degree helped me throughout my career in finance. But there was a point where I felt like I did not have enough knowledge for me to continue when I was doing military contract management at Boeing specifically, and it had a lot to do with overhead costs and things that were a bit more technical. So when I came across that, I did go back to school for an accounting certification, and I did that for a year long. And so that covered, reporting, financial reporting, auditing, everything that you can think about when it comes to accounting. So I did go back and do that, and I feel that that has helped even shape and open more doors ever since.
There's a quick follow-up question on that. Lisa's asking, what part of finance are you? Is that treasury, investing, FPA?
I've actually done almost everything. So I am someone who does not really know what part of finance I wanted to focus in. And so my first job was in a rotation program. And most of these big companies usually have rotation programs for entry level, which means you end up doing a bit of everything. And then at the end, you choose what you feel you like best for you to kind of pick one lane and follow through in that. So I have done FP&A, financial operations, budget, contract management, auditing. I've been an auditor before. Right now I'm doing work related to SOX compliance when it comes to compliance to the SEC for inventory at data centers, warehouses, technical inventory, if that makes sense. So I don't think that I don't have an actual lane is what I would say. I also did see a question on there related to defining success with these big corporations. I wanted to address that specifically, that what I'm speaking on is in regards to my career and my path and my success. It's not to say that everything I'm saying is the way to go. It's the only way to be successful. You can have a finance career, you can have an accounting career in nonprofit and anything else in smaller companies. I personally just chose that this is what I wanted to do. My family immigrated to the States as refugees, and I was 12 years old. So for me, the priority also was stability, and I needed some stability in my life and make money. And these big companies pay very well. And so I wanted to make sure that I align my career goals with something that's also going to pay me. And so when I say, economically, if you don't have representation, you're not able to get promoted, that's like a $20,000 jump, for example. If I say that, if you don't have representation, you don't get promoted, you're missing out on 20K. That's a lot of money. So for me personally, when it comes to success, it's based on my story, my path, my goals, and personally. So just wanted to answer that question as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for addressing that question. Yeah, I saw that in the chat. So yeah, thank you for touching on that. Adolphine, on your side, your business does work with a team back home, sourcing products from back home. What would be your advice for somebody who is looking to do the same thing, run a business, let's say outside of the Congo, but want to work with a team in the Congo?
Well, my advice first would be learn on someone else's dime. I wouldn't recommend starting a business without any experience. Like Faika said, she has a finance experience, she works, she got certification, she's learning, she's worked for different companies. I did the same thing too. I learned under somebody else's dime. I made sure I had the groundwork set. You have to make sure you're financially stable, you're contributing to your 401k, and that you don't have an image of an entrepreneur based on what you see on social media. Now, regarding teams, you're gonna have to switch people up, right? There's your first hire might be your best hire, or it might be a terrible decision. So you have to learn not to take things personally. You have to learn to delegate, which is, like Deborah said, also hard for me to delegate. And if you're gonna do business in the Congo when you're not there, you need to do surprise visits, to show up and make sure people are actually working. And I'm going to be home in a week to do that exactly. And just really be a dictator. You have to say, this is what I want. This is what I need. Do it this way. No question asked. Being nice and kind and trying to get people to do what you want without being stern will get you nowhere except frustrated.
Wow. Thank you so much for your insight on that. And there's a follow-up question for you, Adolphine. So The question is the artisan industry or talent in Congo still alive? And what are the ways to increase more awareness on artisanship in Congo? This question is from Joyce.
It is still alive. Artisans are having a really tough time making a living. So I've been trying to push the Minister of Culture and Arts in the Congo to really to market the artisans more, right? Because there's only so much one company or one group can do. It has to be a national response to this. And there needs to be more of a respect level to artists. And it just can't be, you know, Fali and he knows. Like, you have to think about the guy that makes the Kuba headdress and respect that artistry. You have to think about the person that does textile printing. And so it's really getting the government and other people to really push the artists forward and have an appreciation for the artwork and the process.
Thank you so much, Adolphine. If there's no other question from the panel, from the audience, I would just ask last questions to, first of all, to Joël. Joël, what advice would you give to others who are looking to get into your illustration industry or graphic design or a career similar to yours?
My thing would be, the first thing to always remember that everybody's journey is completely different. And also to remember that just don't always look at what other people are doing, because although it's great to get inspiration from everywhere, but what we tend to do is compare ourselves to other people and not to worry too much about style. And whatever work that you decide to actually, whatever work that you want to get is the work that you have to start creating. So for instance, I kind of had an idea of certain brands that I wanted to work with. I'll kind of like the personal work that I do is the work that client come to me for. So I'm very, very careful with what I put out there. So if I know I want to work with a particular type of brand or in a particular kind of audience, or if I want to focus on picture book, that's the type of work that I really want to start putting out there, and the type of work I want to start sending out to clients as well. So just to be really intentional with the kind of content that you're putting out, and to just be very patient as well, because any creative career, it's amazing when you get there, whatever getting there even means, but it's hard. It's a lot of hard work, and there's going to be times where you're going to question yourself and think, is this what I should really be doing? I've been doing it for 5 years, and I can only say I've been doing it full-time consistently for the last 2 years. So there was a lot of dry days and times when I'm literally physically in tears, but you just have to really have thick skin and just believe in yourself, and the right people will come to you as well, and just put yourself out there as well. And again, it's a very, very, very small world. So be nice to everybody. Just maintain a good relationship with clients, and you literally use social media and your website to your advantage, because the majority of my clients are in America and I live in the UK.
Wow. Great stuff. Marielle, I want to also ask you one last question. You worked in the US at Capitol Hill, US government, but you also work for nonprofits. So what is your advice for somebody who's looking to work in the Washington, D.C. area in international development or even US foreign policy?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit when I was speaking about networking, but I wanted to add intentional networking. And it's great to get someone's business card, but it's useless if you're not actually following up. And it's tough because sometimes you don't get responses right away and it takes a long time, but highly encourage that if you do connect with someone and you think that relationship will be worthwhile, following up and making sure you cultivate a personal relationship too, because those are the people that will come to bat for you and seek opportunities for you. And it feels less transactional, like a lot of the times it does, especially in DC. In addition to following up, I think also, and being intentional, don't go to an event where you have the opportunity to meet someone and network and not actually establish a new relationship. Like, talk to people, and I know it can be scary, but a lot of the times I've even sent cold emails, and I've send cold messages on LinkedIn to folks that I was interested in connecting with. So I highly recommend that. And then I think something that's very much coupled with networking and who you know, which very much is a factor in politics, is being informed, and not just about the countries or the issues that are relevant to you. As a Congolese woman, I of course closely follow I follow what's happening in the country, but I generally try to stay informed about what's going on more broadly in the continent, and then development work in MENA and Latin America, because it's all connected, especially when we talk about migration and those issues. And then as a person in the diaspora, in the African diaspora, I grew up here in the States, so I also have an identity here in the US as a Black woman. And a lot of my work involves interfacing, collaborating with members of Congress and staffers and members. At the end of the day, even those that are like champions for foreign assistance have to answer to their constituents. So I also make it a point to follow what's happening here domestically and locally, and always aim to make and establish that local to global connection, because a lot of the times, especially when bipartisan work that I do, that's how I get that buy-in. And the whole point, at least how I view it, is how do I make this issue more important or relevant to a senator from the Midwest, say farming, for example, and that connection, the challenges of agricultural systems in the US versus in Ivory Coast, and being able to talk about those and establishing some parallels goes a long way, rather than just saying you should care about this because they're fellow humans.
Joel, there's actually, Mahiel, there's actually a question for you. Have you ever considered running for office? This question is from Lisa.
Thank you for saying that. No, I am very much, I think a lot of what's taken place in my career has just, I think, I won't say fully by chance, because I have been intentional about connecting with people and following up and following through, and also just showing up and making sure that whatever it's put before me, I complete, and looking to be available for new opportunities. I rarely say no, and I'm always willing to learn. To that end, I think where I'm most useful in my career is being a connector, and and it's sometimes difficult when you're the face of. And so while some people, I have a lot of friends who are challenged by working for members, because a lot of times you're communicating the ideas and representing the ideas of somebody else. But I think that when I really believe in something, it's easy for me to show up in that. And so at least at this point in my life, and I view the long term, I see myself being more behind the scenes and still very proactive, but yeah.
Great. So looking forward, I promise you this is going to be the last question, unless there's a question comes from the audience, but this question is for Simba. Looking forward, looking at trends, what are some of the trends can we expect in terms of design, fashion, strategy in the area where you currently, the space that you're currently working in? Did I lose Simba?
Oh, sorry. I said that's a good one because there are so many. I personally always look at trends more as like movements and the way, how can I explain this well? I don't look at product trends, so I more look at trends like movements in the society. What are the new needs? What are the new values? So if I would say now, looking at how this whole pandemic is affecting us and everyone is like building an online brand identity because online is all we got, I feel like we will come to a stage where we will be challenged to make these online brands part of our reality again. So how are we going to show up in the physical spaces? So for instance, for my own brand and all the activities I'm doing, I'm really preparing to be physical again. While I'm also, of course, focused on my online brand, I feel like it will be kind of challenging to transition from online to physical, because the consumer will expect to see us again and touch our products again. So did I mention a trend? Is that a trend? I don't know that remember. I feel, yeah, I think that the trend will be making things physical again. I think that's one important thing that I'm focused on personally with my businesses.
Thank you very much, Simba. We look forward to seeing what comes out of the fashion and design industry post-COVID. Thank you so much to everybody on the panel. This was amazing. A lot of insight, a lot of ideas for all of us. I learned so much personally, and I hope that everybody on this forum today learned also from you. And I would like to toss it over to Vanessa. That's all from my side. I'll toss it over to Vanessa, who's going to close this event today.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Wow, I'm so impressed with everybody, and I'm so grateful to be able to be in this space and to listen to your stories and your experiences. So I want to thank all the speakers for graciously accepting our invitation and for sharing your expertise with the audience. I also want to thank well, the guests, our attendees, for joining us on this panel. And yeah, so if you want to stay in touch with us, you can find Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit on Instagram, on their website. The handles, I don't know if we shared it in the chat, but you can find us on all social, Twitter, Kento, Facebook, and then on our website as well. And same for Kento Congo, www.kentocongo.com, etc., etc. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. It was lovely, and I'm gonna pass it over. Please, ladies, stay on. If you can stay on. And I'm gonna pass it over to Lukogo.
All right, everyone. So we had a little over an hour of just wonderful discussion from the ladies. Again, thank you so much, ladies, for allocating your time. I know you all are all over the world, and to do this on a Saturday. But more importantly, I want to thank Vanessa for being so open. So I know that some of the ladies had talked about networking and just reaching out to people. I literally did a cold email, kind of a cold message to Vanessa and said, hey, would you be interested in collaborating on this event? And here we are. So this event today could not have happened without the participation and the collaboration of Nkento Congo and her team. So it's been great. Make sure you follow, I guess somebody wants you to put the Nkento Congo website in the chat box, if you don't mind. Please share the link.
Yes, and I just wanted to mention, so please, everybody that is in the room, make sure that you connect with each other, that we stay in touch, and that we continue so that we can, you know, and make better our Congolese nation. And yeah, just please connect with each other. It would be amazing.
Yes, and we'll be having some more updates on the various things that we'll be doing from Nkento and also from the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit. So the Congolese Diaspora Impact Summit will be having a summit this fall in Washington, D.C. So please follow us so you can get all of the updates to be there. Hopefully we will see Nkento and all of their supporters there as well.